Good afternoon, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Long time no speak from my point of view. I do believe it's been 17 years since we spoke. Thank you for being here.
Oh, a mere few orbits around your sun.
Friend, I'd like to discuss a little bit further the ego issue regarding second-guessing internal dialogues with spirit and the like. Now, over the years, we discussed when we first met guides and the like and certain things. How, as time's progressed, these communications do occur, but at some of the times, part of myself kicks in and says, it's not happening, it's not a reality, you're fantasizing, you're making it up, you're playing with yourself.
Yes.
So, probably should have worded that better. But with regards to that, how can you be, and I know 100% certain is an objective phrase, but how can you be certain that the dialogues you are having internally aren't just made up? For example, about 12 months ago, laying in bed with my partner, etc., and I put out some thoughts to say hello, and it was either you or you in aspect that dialogued with me, and it wasn't a dialogue, it was a dissertation with 4 topics, and I remember the last comment, you will remember this. So I'm articulating that back to you now to establish whether that was you as an individual or whether that was you in aspect through my own consciousness dialoguing with myself.
It was your own higher self tapping into our frequency and delivering the information in our flavor.
Okay. So in that, then, how can I encourage those interactions
by
ongoingly?
Not needing them to happen.
So letting go of the requirement for them to happen.
Absolutely. All expectation needs to be let go of so that you can simply allow what needs to be there to be there.
Okay.
Paradoxically, by needing something to happen, you fill the space in which the thing can actually occur, and thus there's no room for it to occur.
Okay.
You fill that space with the need for it to happen. No longer having the need for it to happen empties the space, and what needs to happen will happen.
So would that then be a corollary? I've been also putting out requests to the auditors, as it were, to interact with you in a dream state.
Yes.
I'm still waiting for the circumstances for that to drop. Would that be sort of the similar thing as the
actually, what you're waiting to do is remember that it's already happened.
Okay, then I'd like to remember that it's occurred. Because
then go ahead.
Well, I don't. I'm uncertain of how to access that memory in this now.
Don't need to.
That's sort of going in a circle for me, and I'm uncertain how to address that, because if you're saying that...
Why is it so important for you to access that memory? That's another way of asking you why you need it so much.
Okay, because the only other time that we've interacted on that level was a hoot, and I enjoyed it.
A hoot?
And I enjoyed it. Well, I could use other terms, but I'm...
All right. But does that mean that other things in your life are not as much of a hoot?
Well said, well said.
Perhaps when you add more hooting to your own life, you will increase your vibration to the level on which more hooting will take place.
Indeed, indeed. All right, I just wanted to cover off on those 2 issues regarding the internal dialogues and how to be able to be certain within yourself that...
Well, again, the first step is not to care one way or another whether you have to be so certain. The idea, again, is to focus on the things that give you joy and just get on about the business of living your life to the best of your capacity in acting on the things that give you passion. And trusting that whatever else you need to know, you will know. And whatever other experiences you need to have, you will have. Remember, you've made appointments, you've made agreements to have certain things happen in certain timing. And the only way you can miss those appointments is by worrying that you will miss those appointments.
Touché.
So, does that help?
It does, brother. It does, brother. Thank you.
All right. Owl, see you later.
Owl. Thank you very much.
Good day, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
All the way from New York, just for one day.
All the way. All right. About that far on your planet from my perspective.
Super excited to be here.
Oh, all right.
I have a question in regards to ever since I started learning about your teachings, and it became evident to me that we actually can learn so much just by being and paying attention to what's going on around us, because nature, our physical nature itself, is a tremendous teacher.
Yes.
And I think that's why you're bringing a lot of analogies in our physical lives, same analogy as a scuba diver, for example.
Yes.
And when you were talking about our ego and our higher self having a conversation, it
Yes.
came to me evident that we actually doing the same thing
Yes.
with our children
Yes.
on a daily basis.
Yes.
We're creating this bond and this trust that it all comes with love, and we just have to negotiate and create this kind of a trust relationship with our children.
Yes.
And once they do that, basically I'm looking at my children right now like my ego in that analogy, basically. Once my children start to trust me enough, we create that bond, and that's where...
Well, understand that your children actually already trust you implicitly. The idea is that they trusted you enough to be fed whatever it is you telepathically fed them about what you believe to be true. So the idea is to allow yourself and your duty as a parent to be clear that the idea that you love them is already clear. But the ideas of how you express the concept of love may need to be brought into alignment. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just talking generalities. The idea is that children are completely implicitly trusting of the parent, and they receive whatever they receive from the parent as if it were the perfect symbol or representation of the parent's love. Now, if the parent is sending negative ego belief systems down that avenue toward the child, then the child will start to interpret negative belief system ego structures as a symbol of love, and that will be the only symbol the child will know, and the only symbol the child will themselves be able to express in life until they get a handle on how to bring that back into alignment with symbols that are more positively representative of the underlying current of unconditional love that is always there. Does that make sense?
It does.
All right.
Going further, there's a definition that we talk about a lot, and you were talking about children being older souls that are coming here as the teachers.
Yes, especially now in this day and age, many of the children being born on your planet and that have been being born now for about the last 20 years or so are, in a sense, not only a new generation, they are actually a different species. And it is representative of souls that have a lot of experience in many of them, that are cross-connecting to many different experiences in many different parallel realities. And by the genetic alteration that is happening within them as they restructure their embryonic bodies, they are creating a genetic structure that will give rise to a personality structure that will not forget as much of who they are as beings, as whole beings, as spirits.
My question was, I'm trying to define for myself, is there such a thing as old soul, if we are eternal beings?
Well, it's a euphemism. Old in this context means they have a certain kind of experience they are bringing to the reality they are interacting with. It's not really a measure of time. It's a measure of the degree of certain kinds of experiences and knowledge they are bringing to share with any particular reality they might be interacting with.
So they are more experienced in the sense in this particular reality than some other soul.
They are more experienced in the kind of knowledge required by this particular reality in order to advance. That's what old soul means. It's not really a measure of time. In the same way that we know many humans sometimes misinterpret the phrase light year and think it's a measurement of time when in fact it's a measurement of distance.
I see.
You understand?
I do.
So, old in this sense is simply a euphemism. It doesn't mean old in terms of time. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bashar.
Bashar, we have a question from one of our listeners.
All right.
This one is, Bashar, do you have an ego?
We have a sufficient amount of ego to keep us focused in physical reality to whatever degree we wish to be focused in it. But again, we remind you, ego by itself is not a negative term. It's just a focusing mechanism. We do not, however, experience the idea of the negative ego.
Do you experience the full range of emotions as humans do?
We do not experience what you would call the emotions of fear.
Sadness?
We do not experience that.
Anger?
We do not experience that.
Frustration?
We do not experience that. Go on, what else you got?
elation?
Absolutely.
Do you give yourself a pat on the back when you do a good job?
The enjoyment of doing the job is enough, because it is far more satisfying than any pat on the back could ever be. And we do not need to pat ourselves on the back because we know creation has our back.
Oh. So when we have a more balanced ego structure,
Yes.
how would a human experience themselves?
As a joyful, playful child. Just experiencing themselves rather than thinking about themselves experiencing it.
It's beautiful.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Okay, going on the line of your definition of abundance.
Yes.
Can you define need?
Again, we understand that sometimes certain terms in your language may have different meanings, and we can understand that it can be confusing at times, especially when some of these concepts are attempting to be translated into linear space-time reality terminology, which may not be accurately representative of some of the concepts that are being sent, but may be close enough. Need in the context of a positive frame of reference is simply that which is necessary for the continued support of a being. Need in the negative sense is that which the ego may think is required, but may in fact only be the idea of a reinforcement of negative attributes or negative beliefs to aggrandize the self and make the self seem more important.
Okay, so knowing that, need being I know that I only really need, the very basics of food, and I know you've had a list from before of certain things. You have to sleep a certain amount, you have to dream a certain amount.
Yes.
There are those needs, but then, all of those can be met without really experiencing much of a joyful life.
Oh, they can be, but believe me, if you do them in the purest possible way, breathing is a joy, eating is a joy, sleeping is bliss.
Okay.
So, yes, and again, you can see there is a different bifurcation of the terminology and the different definitions and the subtleties of the definitions in the one word your language has expressed as the word need.
Yes.
So, yes, you can do them in a sense from a lower vibration. You can do the basics, the fundamentals. But if you only look at them, if you only define those basics as just getting by, then of course you will only experience them in a relatively flat sort of vibration. But if you understand that these basic needs are the very foundation of your ability to have the experience you are having, then they become joyful celebrations. They become things you are grateful for and give gratitude and appreciation to, because they allow you to have the experience that is allowing you to discover more and more and more expansively who you really are. So they all play a part in letting you do that. In other words, you could say, well, the deep sea diver can sort of say, well, yes, I recognize the need for this breathing apparatus. That's all well and good. But when you are 50 feet below, believe me, without that breathing apparatus, suddenly you're very grateful for it. Because it allows you to breathe in an environment that gives you an experience you otherwise could not have. You understand?
Yes, I do.
Does that help?
Yes, following that, for instance, I don't think I need a hung, the musical instrument on the stage, the steel pan.
Yes.
I want one of those, but I don't need one.
Actually, you may find that in the positive context, you actually need one, and that wanting can actually be the negative context.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know how to not judge the want of things.
How about just allowing it to come to you?
Okay.
What about that device gets you so charged up? gets you so excited.
I have a hard time putting in words, I think. I don't know.
But it does excite you.
Absolutely.
You feel that vibration when you look at it, when you think of it, when you hear it, yes?
Yes.
You feel that connection, yes?
Yes.
Then, that is, along with the vision of yourself playing it, that is the only language needed. The feeling and the picture of you playing it in the ideal scenario is the only language needed, the only symbol needed for you to then hand over to the higher self and then forget about it.
Okay.
Let it go. Trusting that the higher mind now knows what you truly vibrationally need, and that it will then bring about the synchronicities and circumstances necessary for the manifestation of that, if, in fact, that is representative of the highest state. Or it might bring you something you couldn't even imagine that would actually allow you to experience more excitement and more joy than you're imagining in your scenario now. Either way, the point is, if you let that go and then continue to simply act at every given moment on whatever option is the most exciting option you have the ability to act on, you will then be trusting by those actions the higher self, and it is leading you. You will trust that it is leading you through those connections, no matter how winding they may seem, no matter how much they may seem to have nothing to do with your original desire. You will trust that because the excitement is there in each of those acts, it is connected, and you will trust that your higher mind is luring you through those excitements to the idea of the manifestation of any symbol that represents your joy and excitement. Did that make sense?
Perfect sense, yes. Okay. When I was as a child, I have a memory of being half asleep, half awake, my bed shaking a lot in the middle, in my dream state kind of. I was just aware of it, but I don't know if it was physical or it was just experience. Can you scan that at all? I don't know if you can provide me any insight on that.
What you're experiencing, and this is actually not that uncommon in your society, is that in those states, you are actually shifting interdimensionally. But if you, let's say, put on the brakes, you hold yourself in idle, in between dimensions, vibrating back and forth, you can actually set up a resonance, a feedback resonance in physical reality that will actually cause the objects to sympathetically vibrate with that feedback resonance. You understand?
Yeah, I remember being almost fearful, though.
Yes, because things were building up. In other words, you have to let the energy go. You have to let yourself make the shift completely. You can't really hold yourself there in between too long. Otherwise, there can be some buildup and some feedback and some blowout of circuits. So the idea of the fear building up was you're reaching the breaking point of your tolerance level. Let it go. That was truly, in that sense, simply a survival mechanism.
I see. All right.
Make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Bashar.
Thank you.
Bashar, another question from our listeners. This was about distinguishing between the ego and the higher mind.
Well, we have talked about that already.
Right. And I guess I just wanted to reinforce this idea that in learning to distinguish between the two, if the thoughts that you're receiving are making you feel small, frightened, decreasing your energy, decreasing your spirit, is it a good bet that that is your negative ego?
It is a good bet, but here's the trick. Again, remember, the ego, the negative ego, is clever. The negative ego may give you thoughts that actually make you think you're feeling good. The way to tell the difference, again, is to take that quiet moment and really pay attention to some of the underlying feelings that go with it. In other words, you can actually realize that if the negative ego is feeding you in such a way as to make you think you're feeling good, if you step back and pay attention, you may actually be able to feel the anxiety underlying that. And that's what lets you know it's the negative ego, attempting to trick you into thinking that anxiety is excitement. But generally, eventually, you will find in the physical reflection of your physical reality, in the mirror of physical reality, the negative ego cannot trick you that way for long. Eventually, physical reality, just being a neutral mirror, will show you something isn't working. Therefore, you've got to take a step back and look at what you thought was exciting and make sure that the excitement is genuinely coming from the higher mind and was not just a trick of the negative ego to allow you to avoid something you're actually fearful of. So always, even if you can't tell in the moment, always the physical reality will show you something isn't coherent here. Something will not make sense. Something will be out of alignment. Something will be out of whack, as you say. And it gives you the moment to step back and see if, in fact, there was actually coherency in what you were getting and where it came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of
I'm putting it finally this way. Again, when the negative ego generally gives you something that may appear to be excitement, but you find yourself still reacting negatively to circumstances that occur in your outer life, that's a good clue that it wasn't actual excitement, that it was still coming from the negative belief system.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So that's how you know from the reflection that is given to you, not that the reflection changes, but how you respond to the idea of what's going on in your physical reality as to whether it was a genuine excitement or simply the idea of a disguised anxiety.
I see. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you approaching your break time? All right.
Thank you, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Thank you. I have a question about your civilization.
Yes.
Do members of your civilization often interact with beings of a much, much, much higher density than your own?
Much?
Or?
Yes.
Okay, great. If so, can you describe them in a way that we would be able to understand?
Generally speaking, you will find that beings of the idea you call seventh density will be mostly energy constructs, energy forms. They will be patterns of light and electromagnetic or electromagnetheric energy. They may present themselves in a variety of ways that again are representative of the symbols of the consciousness of the other civilization they are communicating with. Therefore, sometimes the beings that we interact with of that level actually appear to us as multifaceted crystals floating in the air. Because that is the overall consensus reality of what they represent, a multifaceted representation or aspect of all that is.
Thank you. What have you learned from them recently which has assisted in your own individual growth and evolution?
Oh, thank you. One of the things we have learned from them recently, as you say, in terms of time, is the idea of how, because in a sense they function as our higher minds, how we can experience their level of reality more and more and more and more in what might be called the lower vibratory levels. What interpretations we can recognize as aspects of their reality that are capable of manifesting in our reality, and to interact with them in ways that would let us know we are interacting with them, even though they will be cloaked in manifestations of our reality. They are telling us how to see through our own symbols more and more and more to the pure essence of their being. This is, in your language, difficult to describe beyond this point as to how we would perceive their true essence. But the closest approximation perhaps would be as an infinitesimal spark of light in an endless void of emptiness.
Excellent.
And yet, at the same time, knowing that the infinite void of emptiness is also contained in that infinitesimal spark of light.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another topic. Sorry, I'm dying to know this. Thank you for appearing in the movie Tuning In. There was also...
Well, I did not appear. The channel's body appeared in it.
Thank you for that clarification. There was also another channeler in the movie who claims to channel an extraterrestrial consciousness. And I've heard some audio from them that within the next 15 years, we will cease to have any currency and that we will no longer have a monetary system. I'm just curious to know your perspective on this.
As we read the collective energy now, sometime between your year of 2015 and 2033, you will begin to lay down the basis for the removal or shift or change of the monetary or economic system as it exists now, but that does not mean there will not still be some form of symbolic exchange in that time. So it may not manifest right away, but the foundation of it will begin to be laid in that time.
Okay, thank you.
That's how we would interpret it by reading the collective energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've heard that there are currently many beings throughout the universe observing and watching us at this time.
Yes.
I'm just curious as to how they are observing us. Are they seeing through our eyes? Do they just simply have an aerial view? Are they among us and they're just invisible? Or do they observe us like they're watching reality TV?
All of the above and more.
Thank you.
Depends on the being and from where they are observing.
Thank you. Excellent.
Remember, some beings observe by actually being among you in the sense of having lives, choosing lives among you. In that sense, you could say, I'm observing you that way, because the channel is my past life, or one of them, in your civilization.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's an observation. Other beings may be using ships. Other beings may simply be using their consciousness. Other beings may be doing this through different dimensional doorways and gates. There are as many ways of observing things as there are kinds of consciousnesses and beings. Okay. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be watching you.
This person asks, since I'm creating my own reality, I would like to know exactly how I can use feedback from other people to enhance my reality. How can I take advantage of any negativity from other people in a practical way?
By considering it to be an offer or a suggestion of an optional way to view yourself, and taking the advice simply as advice, to take the opportunity to see whether or not you are still on track with yourself, or whether they are reminding you that some correction, some course correction may be necessary. But once you have made the determination as to whether or not you are in alignment or out of alignment based on their suggestion, you can thank them for the suggestion and decide to do whatever it is you prefer to do. In other words, treat all of that, any criticism, any observation, simply as an opportunity to consider that you may need some alignment, but then make the assessment yourself as to whether that's true for you or not, and thank them for their input, whether you take their advice or not.
Okay, it sounds like having a strong core.
Of course. Because you understand that you would not have attracted them in your reality if it didn't serve a purpose. So whether it serves the purpose of reminding you that you may not be paying attention to something you need to pay attention to, or whether you've attracted them in your reality to reassure yourself that in fact what they're suggesting has nothing to do with you, and that you are steadfast in your assurance of what is your preference, either way, you have still attracted them for a reason. So to use them in that positive light, you will get the best out of it, the most out of it. Okay. And you will then be allowing them to have served you in that way. And you can serve them retroactively by letting them know that their advice, in that sense, was accepted with the loving intention with which it was given, even if they didn't think it was given that way. That will really disarm them. All right?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bashar.
And you, good day.
2 questions. We talk about the ego as if it is a being with consciousness.
Well, in a sense it is. Because your personality construct, to some degree, functions somewhat autonomously once it is created. That's why you can actually negotiate with it in some ways as if it were separate, even though it's not. Did that make sense?
Well, I just wonder, how does something go from... I guess the even bigger question is the difference between energy and consciousness is sort of maybe paradoxical to me as the wave and the particle.
Yes.
So how does something go from not being to being a being with consciousness? You see
All
what
right,
I mean?
let's use an analogy that we often use, and that is the film or movie analogy that exists on your planet. When you are watching a movie, you believe that the characters on the screen, in a sense, have consciousness. Because, in a sense, an actor has given them a voice. But if you actually stop a moment and think about it, you're relating to nothing but a bunch of light. You're relating to an illusion. It's causing you to allow yourself to feel emotions, to think new thoughts, to respond in many ways to what you're seeing on the screen. But what you're seeing is actually not the living actor, nor even a real character. So the idea is similar. You have created a context, a character in context in the ego. You have used consciousness and energy and molded it into a certain pattern in such a way as it actually can be dealt with in an illusionary manner as if it had its own autonomous reality. Make sense? This is for the purpose of creating reflectivity. Make sense? Yes, no, maybe?
Well, it does, except, when it turns into a monster.
Yes. Well, some of you like going to horror movies.
Well, that is a continued part of this question is sometimes I feel extremely angry that somewhere, someplace, some part of me decided it was acceptable to put me in an experience of distress.
Yes.
From the higher perspective, it expands consciousness in limitation and teaches other beings, and it's oh so good for the rest of the universe. But my moment is misery, horror, fear, anger. And I get angry that I've been put in that position, and I want to know who put me there.
Anger, in that sense, is actually the recognition that you put yourself in that position. The anger is from the fact that you're not taking yourself out of it. Because you were not put in the position, you chose it. The anger comes from not being willing to choose something else. So you can use the anger to find out what the belief is that you have bought into that makes you feel like you should not choose something other than those negative experiences. That's what the anger comes from. You're angry at yourself for not choosing something different. And you can't figure out why you're not choosing something different because you're not in touch with the belief system that makes it seem all right to continue in the way that you have chosen in the first place. Make sense?
Well, if myself knew that I could get lost.
Yes.
And knew that I might have these terrible experiences and decided to do it anyway.
Yes.
That,
but you see,
that
from
seems
that
to me like a lack of love.
perspective, but from that perspective, it's not terrible. The idea is it understood that you were going to explore certain themes. It didn't in any way, shape, or form insist that you had to experience them in a negative way. That just recognized that that might happen because any time you walk into a haunted house, things might jump out at you and you might get momentarily scared. At the same time, if you look behind the illusion and understand that they're just special effects, you don't have to be scared. So the higher self knows that you have the capacity to treat these things as illusions and special effects and not have to choose to be scared, even though it knows originally that you could choose to be scared because you walked into a place that has things that can scare you. But the choice is yours as to how you experience the theme. It's not like any part of yourself forced yourself to have to experience negative or scary things. It's showing you that you have the power to transform these things, to see through the illusion. And you're only angry because you haven't done it yet. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because it's sometimes hard to understand the layers of the self. And
yes, but that's all right. The point is to not be angry at yourself for not understanding. That's the first step. And then you give yourself a break and say, it's all right that I don't understand. The paradox is it has to be all right for you to be angry. It has to be all right for you to not understand in order to actually let go of the anger and to understand. But you're not all right with that. And so what you're doing is you're devaluing an experience. You're devaluing the idea of dark side as a valid experience. And by devaluing it, you're attempting to push it away, and by attempting to push it away, you recognize it becomes a spring that has nowhere to go except to bounce back, stronger and stronger and stronger. So the idea is you have to accept that negative experiences are part and parcel of at least what's possible, and that they are valid as choices. When you validate that the dark side is a valid choice, then you don't have to choose it. The only reason you're having a tough time getting away from it is because you will not accept that polarity is part of existence. Make sense?
How do I get to the point where I do accept it?
The idea, again, is to recognize that without the dark side, you wouldn't know the light. So the darkness gives you the opportunity to actually see what you prefer.
Okay.
So you have to validate it as having a reason for existing and not judge it to have no place in reality. You contain dark and light. You contain positive and negative. You contain polarity. You always will. Therefore, you have to accept that part of you is dark and will always be. But you don't have to choose an experience from that side. But the only way to choose an experience only from the positive side is to validate that it's all right if you decide to choose one from the negative side. Once it becomes all right, once the negative side becomes an equally valid choice, then you don't have to choose it. There's no charge on it. There's no onus on it. You're not running away from it. You're letting it live there, but you're not experiencing the effect because you let it be a valid choice. And thus you remove all power from it. You just turn it into a neutral choice. That's all.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did your spiral exercise,
Yes.
the gazing tool,
Yes.
for a few months. I don't know if I did it properly, but I did have
Did you do it your way the best you could?
Yes.
You did it properly.
The experience I had was seeing this 3D persona as a female
Yes.
dropping aside,
Yes.
and a different persona becoming available.
Yes.
So I had a day where the 3D persona went away.
Yes.
The higher persona took over for maybe a day or 2 days.
All right.
And then all
Was
of a
it
sudden,
fun?
Well, the first day I was extremely angry that I felt I had been lied to about who I was.
Now, here's a question for you. If you created a higher persona that is representative of more joy and more excitement, why did you spend the energy and the time focusing negatively instead of spending the time focusing positively and just enjoying the new persona? Why did you choose to stay in the negative energy and spend time berating yourself for having spent time in the negative side unless you prefer to spend time there?
Yeah, I have no idea.
You do.
It felt like it just happened.
No, it does not. And that's where you're fooling yourself. You just have to be willing to let it be all right to have done that. And that will open up a doorway that will let you understand why you choose to do that. And then you will no longer be angry with yourself. You have to stop being angry with yourself for choosing to be angry, for choosing a negative experience. And then you will allow yourself to find out what the underlying belief mechanism is that gets you to think that that's the thing to choose. And then once you know that, you won't choose it anymore. But you have to start by letting it be all right to have chosen it and not be angry with yourself for having chosen it and not being angry with yourself for being angry. Because you're only heaping more inability to understand why the mechanism is there by choosing to spend time in the negative energy instead of the positive. It doesn't just happen to you, it happens through you. All right? So lighten up on yourself for having created the idea of negative experiences. That's the first step to transforming them. You have to let it be all right to have done so. If you're not all right with it, you never will be all right. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
I'm very grateful to be able to interact with you today.
We thank you for the co-creation of the interaction.
And I wanted to take the opportunity to, because I've been seeing you since I was a child,
Yes.
to let you know that although, I'm sure you know on some level, but that although I haven't always been in the awareness state, maybe to accept all the information you were giving me, that...
Well, all you need to accept is all the information you wish to accept.
Okay. Well, then let me say that through recording equipment and being able to play these things back, I've been able to understand on a deeper level, and I appreciate that.
All right. Well, we thank you, and we appreciate your willingness to do that for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Because that makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Literally.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you
Yes.
a question about frequency.
Frequency.
And vibration.
And vibration.
Now, you speak of this often, and for you, you've said that it's pretty much how you do everything, how you go from place to place in your ships. And
Yes, we shift frequencies.
Yes.
Everyone is doing that anyway.
Right.
We're just conscious of it, and in that sense can direct it in the way that we prefer to.
Okay. So my question then
Yes.
is, what is the medium? You refer to vibration. What is it that is actually vibrating or that has frequency?
Consciousness.
Consciousness. So then would that
Consciousness in that sense manifests energy. And in the energy matrix, in the energy medium, there is vibration. It's a self-reflective creation. Consciousness, in that sense, knows itself, and in knowing itself, in reflecting upon itself, in a sense, what is called a Vesica Pisces is created. And in that Vesica Pisces, in that intersection of the reflection of consciousness on itself, is created a different density of consciousness. And that different density of consciousness is what you call energy. And in the energy is the vibration that is representative of the intention of the consciousness reflecting on itself.
Okay.
Did that make sense in your language?
I'm going to have to listen to it on the recording, but yes.
All right.
Now, as far as I had a question about what we call the harmonic series.
Yes.
Well, as I understand it, as the fact that as you play one particular frequency or musical note, other intervals to that particular frequency or note will vibrate. What's the word I'm looking for?
In harmony with it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just naturally resonate.
Yes.
Now, I wonder if you make use of that in any way, or if that has any implications or further use.
We do make use of that, but for us it is a relatively automatic function. We don't think about it. It's just part and parcel of what creates the synchronicity in our reality, and we're aware that it does. We're aware of all the harmonic vibrations in our collective energy that are responsible for manifesting certain synchronicities, but for the most part we don't really think about it. We're aware of it, we know it's there, we recognize it, but we don't think about it.
Okay, well, kind of like us then, musically.
Yes. Because when you are listening to a musical piece in that way, you don't really think about it, you just experience it.
Right.
You experience what it moves within you, and you move with it.
Okay.
So in that sense, our entire civilization, by simply flowing with those moments and those movements and those harmonics, as we move, we know that we are simply in one gigantic dance.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Does that help you?
Yes, it does.
Anything else?
Just briefly, if I could ask if there's any information from guides or anything you could bring through, briefly.
One moment. Do you have a favorite color? Is it blue?
Yes.
Then look to those frequencies and their corresponding tonal qualities in sound to create the kind of music you're looking to create.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we can hear the vibration of a lot of your stomachs grumbling. Enjoy your break for nourishment. We will resume this transmission after your break.